The National Desk, America's News Now.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and former President Donald Trump back in court today for an arraignment, this time in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump officially pleaded not guilty to the 4 charges against him: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Special counsel Jack Smith was also in attendance for the hearing today. The magistrate judge set the next hearing date for August 28th at 10 a.m. before Judge Tanya Chutkan. That is 5 days after the first GOP debate. The judge waived the need for Donald Trump to be there in person for that hearing. Trump was then released on his own recognizance after swearing to not be in communication with any witnesses in this case, unless through an attorney. If Donald Trump violates that condition, a warrant for his arrest could be issued. Just a little while ago, Trump addressed the press at Reagan National Airport.
When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much, everyone.
While former President Trump was in court today, supporters and protesters, as you can see, gathering outside, some of them there outside the D.C. courthouse, either celebrating the latest arrest or remaining defiant that the former president will be back as president soon. Of course, we will continue to follow the latest with Donald Trump. But right now, the extreme heat is also a big story we are following, tightening its grip on a large portion of the country again today. More than 55 million Americans are under heat alerts right now. Dangerous temperatures from the southern plains to parts of the Mississippi River Valley, Gulf Coast, and the Southwest are forecast this week. Phoenix, Arizona, again seeing temperatures of at least 110 degrees. Millions of people are also at risk for severe thunderstorms tonight. Look right here, especially in the central part of the country, as you can see right there on that map. Certain areas in Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado are most at risk for damaging winds and hail. New tonight, 6 former Mississippi law enforcement officers have pleaded guilty to a racist assault against 2 black men. This comes after the DOJ launched a civil rights investigation into the claims. The 2 men say the officer, they burst into a home without a warrant, beat them, assaulted them, and tased them several times for an hour and a half. A deputy then reportedly shot a gun at one of them. Defense lawyers did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The 2 men are seeking $400 million in damages. We now know 2 bodies were found in the Rio Grande along the U.S.-Mexico border. One was found stuck in the linges of the orange buoys put in place by Texas authorities, according to U.S. and Mexican officials. The nationality and cause of death in both cases are unknown, and it's not clear if the deaths are related. Mexico says the buoys are a violation of their sovereignty. Impeached Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in a Houston courtroom today for a preliminary hearing on securities fraud charges that's been delayed by nearly a decade. The 2015 indictment accuses Paxton of defrauding investors in a Dallas tech startup by not disclosing he was being paid by the company to recruit them. If convicted, he faces up to 99 years in prison. The trial date was not set today as they wait for the impeachment proceedings against Paxton to be heard in the state Senate to begin. The next hearing in this case is set for October 6. Expelled Tennessee state representatives Justin Pearson and Justin Jones are back on the ballot today. Members of the so-called Tennessee Three, Pearson and Jones, were kicked out of the state legislature after they protested for more gun control on the Tennessee House floor, along with fellow Representative Gloria Johnson, following the Christian school shooting that killed 6 people in Nashville. Polls close at 7 tonight. William Lowe Jr., the suspect known as the Florida suitcase killer, arrested for first-degree murder in court today. The judge denied his bond. Lowe, a Vietnam veteran, was arrested yesterday after police searched his home Monday and found blood splatters, and a handgun. The woman found in multiple suitcases in the intracoastal waterway has now been identified as Lowe's wife of almost 15 years. Ideal Barbosa Fontes, Lowe had told authorities she flew to Brazil about 3 weeks ago, but he could give no other details as to what flight she was on, how she got to the airport, or even when they had last spoke. A Louisiana law mandating all public schools in each classroom to display "In God We Trust" is now in effect. Arkansas, Florida, South Dakota, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas, they all have similar laws on the books. New tonight, the freighter on Lake Michigan is no longer leaking diesel fuel. The U.S. Coast said the freighter spilled up to 45,000 gallons yesterday. And the investigation is now ongoing to figure out which way the spill is moving along the water. Diesel is a hazardous material and can present significant health hazards. The gunman in the 2018 mass shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue was formally sentenced to death today, a day after the jury's unanimous decision. Robert Bowers killed 11 people and hurt 6 in the Tree of Life synagogue. Victims' family members spoke directly to Bowers at today's hearing, describing the pain and suffering he caused them. An appeal is expected. New details now. Today, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer publicly released the 141-page redacted transcript from Devon Archer's transcribed interview. Monday, Devon Archer testified. Then Vice President Joe Biden was, quote, the brand that Hunter pitched to businesses around the world. Republicans are making the case this was done to enrich the Biden family, while Democrats maintain then Vice President Biden did not know to what extent Hunter was using his father's name. Former President Donald Trump, trying to fend off another criminal indictment and stay out of jail, appeared in court today, entering a plea of not guilty. So what's his strategy and will it work? The National Desk chief political correspondent Scott Thuman was at the courthouse today and has more from Washington.
6 insurrection against Donald Trump.
While outside, the antics and action inside, the legal strategies were taking shape. Prosecutors say they have mountains of damning evidence, witnesses, and documents. So how does Trump's team plan to counter? First, the timing of it all. Election season. Famed defense attorney and author of Get Trump, Alan Dershowitz.
It does constitute election interference, even if it's not intended to be election interference. The effect is to influence the election by denying Trump the ability to campaign.
A top Trump complaint posting, why didn't they bring this ridiculous case 2.5 years ago? They wanted it right in the middle of my campaign. That's why. Hence, the desire by Trump's team to delay as long as possible, as they requested, so far unsuccessfully, in the Florida classified documents case, to push it until after voters pick the next president.
The prosecution wants to move it more quickly than it should be moved, and the defense probably wants to move it more slowly than it should be moved. Actually, if this was not an election year, the trial would probably occur in October. Right before the election, but that's not going to happen.
Then there's free speech. Was Trump just expressing his belief in a rigged election?
Our defense is going to be focusing on the fact that what we have now is an administration that has criminalized the free speech and advocacy of a prior administration.
But can prosecutors prove Trump's intent?
I have come to believe that he knew well that he had lost the election. What I think is important is the government has assumed the burden of proving that. And they're going to have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
And then, of course, there is the venue itself. Washington, D.C., not exactly Trump territory when it comes to choosing a pool of jurors. And so Alan Dershowitz telling me he believes one of the first things that Trump's team should do is try and get this trial moved out of the city, put it in Virginia, perhaps West Virginia, where he believes that he would face fewer, quote, Trump haters. Didi.
Since the very beginning, Scott, you have been walking us through every step of this. What is the biggest takeaway from today? And do you see any sign that these multiple arrests and indictments are taking a toll on the former president?
No, and I think that is the biggest takeaway, Didi, the fact that the president has now been arrested 3 times in 4 months. This is someone who has lost 2 popular votes and twice been impeached, yet he is overwhelmingly in the lead in the Republican primary polling right now. Many polls suggest he will be the one to face President Biden in the general election. And his fundraising, although he's spent a ton of it in legal fees, his fundraising has been significant as well. And I think that this is just one more example, despite the fact that we're still waiting to see what happens in Georgia. It shows that the president is proving to have the staying power that he claims he's always had.
All right, Scott, thank you for continuing to watch this very closely. We know you'll keep us posted. Scott Thuman reporting live in Washington, D.C. Thanks. Saudi Arabia is extending its oil production cut for at least another month. The kingdom says it's cutting 1 million barrels a day to support the stability and balance of oil markets. Saudi Arabia says the reduction may be extended or deepened if needed. Experts warning the move could push U.S. gas prices higher. That news comes as gas prices continue to climb as the week goes on. According to AAA, the average cost of a gallon of gas today is back up to $3.82. That's a 2-cent rise from yesterday, and it is up 11 cents from last week. But still, gas remains lower than last year at this same time. It was $4.16 on average. Coming up next here on the National Desk, how things could get even more complicated for the Trump campaign as legal cases against the former president pile up. And what's driving more international travel among Americans and why some airlines are cutting their prices. Then, the DOJ now in question after 2 deadly Boeing plane crashes. What victims' families are asking for now. We're back in 90 seconds. Former President Donald Trump is currently flying back to New York before heading back to New Jersey following his arrest and arraignment today in Washington, D.C. He's not shying away from talking about his indictments on the campaign trail. Just before appearing in court, Trump posted on his Truth Social, "I am now going to Washington, D.C. to be arrested for having challenged a corrupt, rigged, and stolen election. It is a great honor because I'm being arrested for you. Make America great again." But as the election calendar inches closer, things could get more complicated for the Trump campaign. National correspondent Atra Elnishar reports from Washington.
To understand how former President Trump's legal troubles and presidential campaign are colliding, look no further than his merch store. Not guilty mugs and shirts marketed to his supporters who don't appear to be breaking from Trump despite a long list of criminal accusations against him. A recent New York Times Siena poll, which was taken just a few days before news of Trump's third indictment, shows Trump in a dead heat with President Biden when respondents were asked who, between the two, they'd vote for if the election was today.
They're trying to find something. All them indictments ain't even worth it.
Whether there's truth to it or not, that's for the courts to decide.
As Trump is accused of more crimes with a potential fourth indictment coming from the state of Georgia, court proceedings could throw a wrench in his campaigning schedule. Here's what it looks like so far. Next Tuesday, Trump's got a campaign event in New Hampshire. The first GOP debate, which he hasn't yet committed to, is August 23rd in Milwaukee. On October 2nd, the trial begins for New York Attorney General Letitia James's civil fraud lawsuit against the Trump Organization. January 15th marks the start of a second defamation trial against Trump in which E. Jean Carroll seeks new damages. It's also the day of the Iowa caucus. 2 weeks later, the trial begins for a class action suit against Trump and his business for allegedly promoting a pyramid scheme. March 5th is Super Tuesday. March 25th begins the trial in the state of New York's criminal hush money case against Trump. On May 20th, the trial in the classified documents case is set to start. July 15th is the Republican National Convention, and November 5th is Election Day. Running for president already promises a grueling schedule. Trump's is sure to be even more packed and complicated as he juggles the campaign and the courtroom. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
The number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits went up slightly last week to 227,000. As you can see here, it gives us an idea of the number of layoffs. It's a relatively low level and indicates a strong job market in spite of the Fed's interest rate hikes. The number of uninsured Americans hits an all-time low. That's according to the CDC. As of early 2023, just 7.7% of Americans did not have health insurance. In 2022, 23 million Americans lack coverage, and that fell to 22 million this year. But officials say that trend could quickly reverse with Medicaid disenrollments that come with the end of the COVID-19 public health emergency. New tonight, 2 Navy sailors have been arrested on charges related to national security and China. A 22-year-old sailor serving on a ship based in San Diego was charged with espionage and a conspiracy to send Chinese officials defense information. Another sailor based outside of L.A. was charged with conspiracy and accepting a bribe from a Chinese official. U.S. officials familiar with the charges did not say if the charges were related. Americans are booking more trips abroad and fewer trips within the U.S. That's according to fare tracking company Hopper. International airfare is up 10% from last year, but domestic airfare is falling, with round trips inside the U.S. down 11%. Experts say Americans want to go abroad more now that COVID-19 restrictions are over. Some U.S. airlines, in fact, are slashing their prices in a bid to get Americans to vacation closer to home. Airlines like JetBlue, Southwest, and Alaska Air are being forced to discount prices as global airlines like United and Delta cruise right along. U.S. carriers are banking on domestic ticket sales to pick up again in a few months when people take trips home for the holidays. Developing now, a lawsuit has been filed against the manufacturers of the weight loss drugs Ozempic and Mounjaro, alleging that patients weren't properly warned about the risk for stomach paralysis. The drug labels do warn of potential stomach problems. Novo Nordisk says these are well-known side effects, in most cases are mild to moderate for a short time. Hyundai and Kia are recalling nearly 92,000 cars in the U.S. They're also telling owners to park them outside and away from buildings until they're repaired. They say an oil pump controller can overheat and cause fires. Dealers will make any necessary replacements. The company that owns Bud Light saw a sharp drop in U.S. revenue in the second quarter. It fell by 10.5%, about $395 million worth from the same time last year. Anheuser-Busch even says it was driven by the volume decline of Bud Light that followed backlash over the Dylan Mulvaney partnership. The company is saying its U.S. market share stabilized after falling. We are taking the pulse of America. Our team of nearly 4,000 local journalists bringing you the headlines from across the country. We start with a drastic reduction in pollution at a power plant in West Virginia.
Omnis Fuel Technologies completed the purchase of the Pleasants Power Station Tuesday and has since let the plant's some 160 workers know that they get to keep their jobs. Omnis plans to use a process it developed to convert coal to hydrogen and burn it at the 13-megawatt power plant. It claims that will cut 95% of the greenhouse gases emitted by the sprawling plant along the Ohio River in Pleasants County.
We will not be burning coal. We will be vaporizing the coal particles, and hydrogen will come off of that process, as well as graphite. then the hydrogen that is produced there will be piped directly into the power plant and used as the fuel source for generating power.
The graphite can be used for batteries.
79-year-old Verena Cadet wandered away from her house in West Palm Beach Monday morning, but she wasn't reported missing until the afternoon. After relentlessly searching, authorities say Cadet was found more than 24 hours later, dead on the side of a roadway nearby. Officials with Alzheimer's Community Care say, sadly, situations like this aren't considered rare.
Unfortunately, it's not. It's quite common.
The Family Resource Organization, based in Palm Beach County, provides patients who might wander off with special tracking devices, completely free to the family.
One is a radio frequency device that the patients will wear 24/7. And the other is a global positioning system device, which is clipped to whatever clothing, day or night clothing they're wearing, that can also give an immediate signal to the caregiver on an app on their phone.
With specific frequencies, the police are able to track those wearing the device in minutes.
James Deutsch and two of his buddies were heading in after a morning of fishing on the Central Coast. They saw splashing on the water, so they shut off the boat's engine.
We got a little bit closer and then saw the fins and realized it was a shark. And got a little bit closer and got some great views of it.
Deutsch says the 10 to 12 foot great white was feasting on what looked like a baby sea lion.
Please put it there. The Department of Justice now in question for when it gave Boeing an immunity deal, protecting the company and its executives from criminal prosecution for two 737 MAX plane crashes. Spotlight on America's Lisa Fletcher is following the case.
Less than 6 months apart, two Boeing 737 MAX planes crashed, killing everyone on board. As part of an immunity deal with the Department of Justice, Boeing admitted to misleading federal regulators about the safety of its planes. In exchange, the company and its executives would be protected from criminal prosecution. Under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, the law requires victims be consulted in the immunity agreement process. But in this case, were left out, which is why families are asking a federal court to invalidate the deal.
So it's very important that this court turn back and say, okay, you broke the law, the Department of Justice, you didn't consult with victims. Now that the agreement is not valid. We have to make a new plan, a new prosecution.
Nadia Milleron's daughter, Samia, died in the second crash on March 10, 2019. She and other victims say Boeing should not be protected from prosecution.
Is there evidence that proves that Boeing's executives acted in a criminal manner?
Well, in this case, Boeing, the company, has admitted that it committed a crime, conspiracy, and the district judge has found that this was the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history. 346 people died, but nobody was ever held criminally accountable, and that's what this case is all about. Boeing, the company, and its then leadership should be criminally prosecuted for the deadly crimes that they committed.
Paul Cassell is a former federal judge and law professor who made the argument before the appeals court.
We're hoping that the Court of Appeals will send this case back to the district court and strike out of this agreement the immunity provisions.
If the DOJ has already demonstrated its willingness to essentially protect Boeing and its leadership, why should families have any hope that that would change?
Well, this deal was done secretly and hastily at the close of the previous administration. So we're hoping that if the courts order the Justice Department to take a fresh look at the case and a fair-minded assessment of the evidence, that the result will be very different.
Earlier this summer, a Texas district court determined the Department of Justice violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act, but concluded it was powerless to take action. If the appeals court finds in favor of the victims, it will send the case back to Texas with guidance on how to proceed.
Victims' families tell me that the hearing went as well as it possibly could have, and they say that based on the judge's line of questioning, it seemed that they may have some pretty innovative solutions. That said, a verdict from the three-judge panel is not expected for months. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Lisa, thank you. If you love the outdoors, clear some time on your calendar. We're back in 90 seconds. Tomorrow, you can visit a national park for free. The National Park Service is waiving entrance fees for the day to celebrate the Great American Outdoors Act anniversary. Legislation that helps fund national park maintenance. Visitors still have to pay camping fees. If you can't make it tomorrow, there will also be fee-free days on September 23rd and November 11th. That's going to do it for us for now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight.